Alright, so basically this is episode 1 of RPG Workshop, where myself and a couple friends, today we have Caleb, say hello.
Hello.
James, how you doing?
Pretty good.
And I'm Josh. Basically, what we're doing is it's a little bit of a podcast workshop, and I'm going to have my desktop feed up so you guys can see the template that I'm working with that I put together. And we're basically going to collaborate and develop either quests, new content, one-shot adventures, or maybe down the road some larger content if we feel like we like this. I guess so. Let's pick a topic. I think I'd have one I'd like to suggest from the few that we kind of slapped into the idea box. Do you guys have any specific suggestions? Ones you've been looking forward to working on?
I'm open for anything.
Yeah, I'm just about up for anything. I don't have any particular specific one I'm up for.
Okay. Well, I was waiting for Mahoney to join us because it sounded like she was maybe wanting to work on hers, and I was going to invite her in to like watch us do the first one, so she could get a little bit of an idea of what we're doing, so it just kind of makes more sense. But I haven't been able to get a hold to her, so we're gonna rock with idea number 1. This is the one I've been kind of had in the back burner and back in my mind for a while now. Scenario theme, horror and cult culture. As you can see, if you got my feed up, I just started slapping some basics and some notes down in the template that I put together. Not all this is just a placeholder. Basically, what I wanted to do was take a monster that I had read about a long time ago called the Oblex and design a quest around that. Are you guys familiar? Do we need to go over it?
I've heard of it before.
Yeah, I kind of remember it.
Should we review for the viewers?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is we're going to go through the Oblex, and then we had basically some like thematic points or ideas we definitely wanted to tick off while we write this, and then that'll get us to our starting place. So I went ahead and went to, I pulled up D&D Beyond and pulled up the Elder Oblex and the Oblex Spawn, and I got into the Forgotten Realms wiki. I'm going to read off the Oblex, what we know about it. So the Oblex was an extraordinarily intelligent ooze created by mind flayers that fed on other creatures' memories. They were capable of using those memories to create replicas of their victims, which they used to further hunt and feed. I kind of feel like it's appropriate for like a horror thing. As Oblexes absorbed the memories of their victims, they could replicate credible copies. These impersonations, made of the same ooze as the Oblex, were otherwise identical to the original victims, except for a faint smell of sulfur. They could travel up to 120 feet away, but not entirely separate from its body. Generally, they remain attached through a small, transparent tether. They can move through extremely tight and narrow spaces. Behavior. Oblexes were attracted to sharp minds. They tended to prefer the minds of intelligent individuals, such as spellcasters. When finding a suitable individual, they proceeded to briefly engulf their target's body, draining portions of its memories when pulling away. An affected victim became drained and confused, having difficulty to recall or use any abilities. At the same time, the Oblex learned all of its victims' languages and abilities. Cunning hunters, Oblexes use their impersonation abilities to lure more victims into danger or to attract better sources of nourishment. We can reference combat whenever we start getting to that point. Ecology. The Oblex reproduction cycle was intrinsically connected to its feeding habits. As an Oblex fed, it slowly became saturated with its victims' accumulated memories and personalities. Eventually, a saturated Oblex buds off into a smaller creature in order to avoid going insane. So they can like become too full and kind of like self-exterminate. Let's see, history. They were designed by mind flayers with the purpose to serve as advanced scouts. Blah 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 blah. I think we all get it. Any takeaways from that before I get into my notes?
Not really, other than like it. It sounds like a closet sort of infiltrator, misdirection sort of monster.
Well, I'll kind of run my basic ideas past you guys, and we'll start putting something together. Let's see. So, I wanted to do a couple interesting things with the Oblex. Because they can absorb individuals and create near-perfect replicas, I was thinking about using this with kind of like a Jonestown cult scenario. Perhaps these cultists believe that the Oblex is some kind of like path to immortality. So they'll like feed their loved ones, or they're sick or elderly, to the Oblex, and it will produce replicas. So believable to them that they believe that basically this is just like an ascendant form of existence. And basically, this whole town will secretly operate under like this like Oblexian religion, with everybody pretty much being propagandized into their belief system. So what they do in order to feed the Oblex is they come up with luring schemes to basically get adventurers or sharp-minded folk into its clutches. And I have a short, kind of like a one-shot story rundown of how I think this will happen. Unless you guys have any ideas or points of inspiration so far.
I'm kind of intrigued to kind of hear where this goes before really jumping in. I mean, it's a pretty good basic concept.
You want to hear a little bit more what I got before we start nitpicking?
At least I do.
Okay. All right. Well, let me maximize this, and I'll show you my my short rundown of this quest. All right. So my notes are. So the town is a town. I'm thinking of like a sleepy village, kind of like you guys have seen the Van Helsing film. I can't remember
Yes.
which actor.
That was Jackman.
Yeah, Hugh Jackman. Van Helsing. I'm thinking of like a sleepy village like this, kind of a Transylvanian vibe. And when we get into the setting, like notes, we'll come up with some descriptive elements. All right, so that's the town I'm thinking of. I was leaning on some of my older homebrew notes, and I just pulled this name Dunwich from like this creepy town that I had built. So we'll probably run with Dunwich unless we come up with some other ideas. But here we are, town of Dunwich. It's being run by a Jonestown type cult that worships of a dark entity in the depths under their town that they believe imparts immortality on those they sacrifice to it. The Oblex that they worship reanimates versions of their loved ones that they have sacrificed. The cult also feeds to it any adventurers or nosy individuals that threaten their secret. There are few who dissent, but they dare not speak against their leader and are very unlikely to reveal any plot, though they may act suspiciously. And if you press them hard enough, perhaps they might crack a little bit, or they'll flee. And then maybe like the next day, if you guys stick around for a while as adventurers, maybe they just get killed off by their brothers and sisters. Going for the real creepy, like secret cult kind of stuff. The adventurers are here because they are searching for a missing girl who ran away from home. And that's where we could pick up on the adventure, is you're just adventuring about and you run to this old man that's like searching up and down the roads, and he says, "Hey, I'm missing somebody." We can narrow down the details on that. They don't know that while she was here, she was caught nosing around and has been fed to the Oblex. Supposedly. Like that's what's going on behind the scenes. If the players inquire at the village, they learn that several people have seen young folk sneaking around the decrepit manse of their long passed away lord. This is of course a lure they use to have players enter the lair of the Oblex. The manse is a decrepit dungeon environment And the set piece culminates in the depths where they have followed what appears to be a young woman who has been evading them and kind of like luring them further and further into the rundown mansion. The Oblex attempts to devour the party, and the cult assists. So I'm imagining like this is where the cult becomes involved. They'll show up if you guys find the Oblex, or if it seems like you're going to deal combat with it, and they'll assist. So like the main enemy is going to be the Elder Oblex, obviously, and you'll deal with minor enemies, the Spawn Oblex. They're very low rank. That's something we could throw in there. And then the other significant enemy would probably just be a number of cultists. But I want to give them some depth, so they're more than just like the generic robe-wearing dudes.
So, already in mind, from what you've described, I'm kind of thinking something like the original Wicker Man film.
Wicker Man, never heard of it.
Kind of goes into this cult idea with basically a character going after his perceived daughter, and kind of being led into a trap in a similar manner.
That's a good point. I have just a couple more notes. Let me go ahead and get them through so we are all on the same page, and then I'm going to pick right back up on that, alright?
Alright.
Okay. So the manse is a dungeon. I covered that. Basically, they encounter the Oblex. It attempts to devour the party. The cult assists. If the players spend the night in the village, and this is just kind of like a passive note, they might see the beginnings or end of a ceremony as robed villagers wielding candles enter or leave the mansion. So I'm already kind of thinking of like some environmental notes, like if the players stick around for a while and try to investigate, I want to have some like layers of depth here. To close, the girl and any who have been devoured cannot be reclaimed, and the party more or less is intended to leave empty-handed. If the cult is defeated, the leader will call upon his followers to sacrifice themselves to the Oblex, and they commit mass suicide. And this will kind of be like phase 2 of the fight, where the Oblex will become engorged and then start to butt off other large Oblexes. The Oblex becomes engorged, the mansion begins to crumble around them, indicating they should escape. Open-ended on resolution. You guys could kill it or whatever. I don't really have a locked-in thing there. If the players return to the quest giver seeking his lost daughter, this is an option to she was caught. The optional is that you return to the quest giver saying you could not retrieve his daughter, and they may discover that this is all a ruse actually to attract adventurers into the village and their clutches. If the player reveal they have defeated the cult, he will become enraged and attempt to murder the players. So there's like 2 ways you could go about it. The guy like legit lost his daughter. You go into the town, and they offed her, fed her to the Oblex, and they kind of use that story of kids sneaking around, runaways, and the old mansion to lure you in there, and or even the guy that sets you off is part of the whole lure scheme. But that's what I have so far. And then Caleb, you wanted to follow up with some Wicker Man notes, because you said that kind of goes in par with it.
Oh yeah, especially once you revealed the whole on one of the potential options for how a DM could run it is the daughter and thing is part of the trick of getting them in there. Because in Wicker Man, that's kind of the lore in a similar manner. And I think that kind of works for the kind of vibe you're going for. And I would suggest even checking out the original film, not the Nicolas Cage one. Check out the original one for some notes, maybe, for this one. Because there's Christopher Lee plays the leader of the cult in that one. And he plays it really well, and I think that you might be inspired potentially for a good idea of how to write the cult leader. Yeah, it's the 73. It's the 73 one.
No, we're not going to watch it right now, but we'll revisit that.
Oh yeah. It definitely has a lot of the themes you're going for, and I think there's some good inspiration to be taken from there, especially since it's been a while since that ideas have kind of been put into stuff properly.
Well, this is the first time we're doing this. We might come up with a format where it's like one Saturday we lay down all of the bones of an adventure or a quest, and then we come up with ideas of things we want to review, and then maybe we come back to put the flesh on it. We'll see how this goes. James, any questions on the premise? We're going in a good direction already. You got any notes or things you would do differently? None of this is hard and fast. These are just kind of like some bullet point notes I put together on how I imagine this quest going.
I mean, the only thing I would recommend is, as always, like, you have to make the hook to where there's like some sort of material reward to draw most players in. Always have a setup to where like their characters would care about this, because your alternative is that they may not actually go down this adventure path. I mean, that's always a problem with like a predetermined or pre-built path you want them to go down, is that they may decide to go a different direction, or they may just go there and kill everyone in the village before your whole thing's revealed. I mean,
yeah,
I would always like.
That is an
I always.
I like to explore these alternative routes. So yeah, we'll talk about that as well. For example, the way the Oblex operates, we can determine if we want the Oblex to be projecting these replicas into the town, or if they're only going to be like encountered in the rundown mansion. And then the players are like, "What's this? Who are these people?" And they like try to follow them down, and then the people just like walk away and lure them in deeper. Or how we want to use these replicas. But it could be possible that the players try to murder the people in the town, and then hey, they're all replicas. Fuck, I don't know. But you were talking about material rewards.
Yeah, I mean, there's, I mean, as a potential lure to get them in, because most players, like, if you're like, oh yeah, you have, you're going to have them do a quest, they're going to expect something out of the quest. It's not just going to be like, oh, some sort of role-playing reward necessarily. It depends on the party makeup. Like, if you do a pre-built or a one-shot, you need to have the right mindset. And if this is like a fork off an existing campaign, you have to figure out how the players would actually react to it.
So, on that note, just to make sure we're on the same page, the fact that the primary end opponent for this, hopefully, would be an Elder Oblex. It does have a challenge of 10, which I mean that I believe that means that a party of 4 at level 10 should be able to equally challenge this up to 4 times in Wood Adventuring Day. So I think a party of level 5s should be able to handle an Elder Oblex. Level 4s? What do we think?
Let's see.
I'll feed back into your point, I promise.
Very good. Closer look at that. Hit points 115, armor class 16. Has multi attack. Let's see how much damage it can do, but per hit.
15 bludgeoning damage and some psychic damage.
Yeah. So I would say
party level 5 or 6. Because it doesn't.
I think
a fight heavy story. I'm assuming.
I think a party level 5 would obliterate this, honestly.
Yeah, because I'm thinking
yeah, it's very possible.
It's just gonna be a nuke fest. You know what I mean?
I mean, even if you have some difficult fights, because this is 115 hit points, and it's armor class 16. So if you're dealing with like a fighter at level 5 is going to be able to maybe not handle it by himself, but do a good job of murdering it.
Let's say the most dense point of conflict would be an Elder Oblex and maybe 4 or 5 cultists, and I think they're level 2 themselves. Do we feel like a level 5 party of 4 players would be a competent challenge?
More than competent.
Do we? So, with this being like a horror setting, generally that is tied to like difficulty or like threat of mortality. Should we kind of aim this towards a level 4 party, level 3 party even? I really want the foe to be imposing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, hold on 1 second.
But not so much that it one-shots a player and then they get upset.
4, I feel, just from looking over it, is achievable. 3 would be a challenge and maybe a character dies. But that also could work for the benefit of the game, depending on the party.
I want it to be challenging enough that there is a real threat of death. I haven't done all the calculation tables on challenge ratings before, so yeah, I want there to be the challenge, the threat of death, and like a player at least having a probability of being offed, and then being like turned against the party as a replica. Well, where that brings us back to your point, James, is that if we establish that this is, oh, I just had a place number there already. If we establish that this is going to be a challenging quest for 3rd level players, we know approximately what power rating to set our reward, our material reward for. Which brings us back to your previous point. And it might be something that is themed towards mind flayers or aberrations. I don't know if like we want to feature like a magic item that the party acquires or something as a reward. Kind of geared towards those attributes. Or what did you have in mind as a material reward?
Well, I mean, it didn't even have to be a material reward. It'd just be the promise of it. I mean, if it's a one-shot, it's...
Well, ideally this could be a one-shot, or you could literally plug this into any adventure.
I'm thinking on it.
So assuming it's a one-shot, maybe we have the material reward, like a magic weapon or something, that is achievable like mid-quest, and could actually be useful during the quest, or the final encounter. And if it's just plugged into another adventure, then hey, you get to keep it after the end anyways, so.
I think the biggest problem though that I think is kind of the point is just the why are the heroes getting involved, I guess. And saving a child, yes. I feel like since it's a one shot, you could always argue that it's connected to a player and that it's somebody that they know or related or.
So you weren't necessarily stressing an actual material reward so much as you were saying, what's the motivation for the players to be involved?
Yeah. So if it's like part of if it's part of an adventuring, like a campaign or an overall campaign, it needs to be like some sort of reward or some sort of like association with it.
What are the stakes? I follow you now. Okay. I think I heard you say something, and I thought you meant something else. Well, here's some ideas, and you guys feel free to crank any out you got yourselves. So this will be kind of like establishing event. Where's my? Okay, that's the adventure. This is our adventure primer, adventure setting, Badlands, faction, NPCs. Looking around them. Okay, so our inciting event. Okay, here's some ideas. I'm just gonna fire them out, bounce them off. Let's say the person looking for his daughter, or it could be anybody. I just figured like a lost daughter would perhaps be something players would be more inclined to say, well, let's go look for her and help her out. Damsel in distress type thing. But it could be anybody. Let's say that the person looking for his lost daughter or runaway daughter is, if we go the cultist route, maybe he kidnaps somebody important to the party. 1. Or 2, it's a lord from a surrounding area, and he's willing to just pay a mass sum of money. One's a little bit more typical cliche, tropey. The other is a little bit more like party invested. Now, the one where it's like somebody important to the player has been kidnapped. That kind of already puts the players in like a skeptical mood when they arrive in the village, which I don't know, kind of like throw off the like impeding doom that like you don't really see coming, with it being a horror themed thing. Also with the kidnap, it requires work on the part of the DM to make that person to choose somebody relevant to the party. Do you follow me?
So I think in some ways, maybe at least from my own view, another way you could set it up is you could have the party coming upon this town naturally as a rest spot, or they're traveling to another place and it just happens to be in the middle of the place, and then you can set a couple of hooks there, like you could have it where like they need shelter or something like that, and they have to do someone a favor, which leads them deeper into the town's mystery. Like, and other, like you set up that sort of paranoia style that way. Well, if you have like if they're looking for,
What's that film? It's called The Village or something, where there's like I want to say they dress up as like monsters in that case, but it's kind of like there's a deep secret.
Yeah, it's the village. Yeah, something like that could be interesting.
Okay, I feel you. So we have questionable dude has a runaway daughter. We have it's a lord willing to pay large sum of money. We have the players stumbling into this unassuming village, unaware of the danger. I like that. We could also couple that with like a questionable events that keep the players there, and until they address the problem.
yeah, I mean,
Like they're unwilling to let the players depart.
or there's a bad storm or something like that.
Not quite Silent Hilly, but like that's a possible as well.
Or there's a bad storm, or like one of the bridges that they have to cross is washed out nearby, or something like that, where they have to stay in the town until something like allows them to continue.
Okay, so out of those options, let's go ahead and just pick one, nail it down, and move on to the next thing. What do we like the best? Unassumingly enter the town and are unable to leave? Is that kind of what we're leaning on?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a good one to go with.
Okay, so we have how we get there, how we start. Do we have any notes with the general layout of how I kind of envisioned this quest? Other than the inciting event? We're still cool with like the Jonestown type cult, the secret plot, the worshipping of the Oblex, feeding it people, luring people into that. We're more or less all still on board with that concept.
Yeah, I'd say maybe put a little more focus on whoever the cult leader is, just a little bit, just to kind of create a secondary villain.
I feel you. Which leads us to our next segue point now that we've established our inciting event. We can either try and nail down some setting details like environment, atmosphere, architecture, mood, or do you guys want to try and nail down some descriptive elements of the town of Dunwich? Or, from what you were saying, do we want to jump to NPCs and factions and start to nail down our primary villain, the cult leader? Because while the Oblex is going to be like the menacing, like, elder creature, I really think that the cult leader, being cogent and intelligent would probably be the actual villain. because this is all like a result of his machinations and propaganda. Where are we at?
I mean, yeah, the cult leader should be the primary villain, and then you have the Oblets as the second, sort of the boss fight, but sort of in the shadows.
Cult leader. Let's come up with a name or a character concept. Rely on any media that strikes you as inspirational. I mean, my go-to inspiration for this was learning about the Jonestown massacre. Like, I'd always heard the like "don't drink the Kool-Aid" comments. I was not really aware until last year, like what the historical aspect of that was, and found out all about the Jonestown massacre. And it kind of inspired me, in like that. I always kind of wondered why cults in video games or RPGs were like really like thin, not a lot of complexity, not a lot of depth, and they were all pretty generic. I was like, I want to do like a horror cult setting, and I want it to really have some depth and character. You follow?
Yeah.
So I definitely want, if we have only one fantastic NPC with some depth, I think it needs to be this cult leader. Because he's basically, like, the key to all of this is his charisma. If you follow me.
Mm-hmm.
So, who do we want to rely on as inspiration? Any interesting characters from movies, film, or video games? As like a start point.
I probably should have dropped that in the podcast chat, but I dropped it in the workshop chat. I dropped the image of the Wicker Man villain just to kind of give a little look.
I would say base it on your setting, like the setting you have in the world. Trying to base it off of like
the theme I have in mind, but we can go with anything. That's why I have you guys here. I was thinking of kind of like a Transylvanian type setting. Dark, moody. My diction fails me right now.
I would say base it off of what's that D&D setting that's in that
I've been wanting to do a campaign in it for a while. Now I've lost the name, but Curse of Strahd setting, that one.
Yes.
Ravenloft.
Okay. Yeah. Because if you're in for Transylvania and D&D, Ravenloft is it.
Standard human, and just making him totally threatening out of sheer charisma. If you follow.
I mean, the thing about the cult leader, what makes them scary is their followers, the hold they have on the followers, rather than like necessarily the cult leader himself. So like you could have the frailest cult leader, and it's more just his connections and stuff like that to the rest of the community. So really, what it becomes is that the cult leader is just a figurehead. It's really just a sense of rawness of the community rather than just an individual. Is what makes a cult terrifying in that sense.
Okay. If I could capture that in a single statement that we can always come back to whenever we're adding more to this character, how would you wrap that up? The cult's power is derived from its community more so than the individual? Is that kind of what you're...
Yeah.
Yeah, because a cult leader kind of isn't effective without people who are willing to listen.
Mm-hmm. And the source of that power isn't so much that they fear the cult leader, but they fear the blind servitude of the other followers?
A lot of it, well, in terms of the followers themselves, they fear more of what would happen if they're no longer part of the group.
Yeah, I had a little bit to speak to this, and I'll go back to it real quick. There are few who dissent, but they dare not speak against their leader and are very unlikely to reveal any plot, though they may act suspiciously. So they have fear. I just kind of want to work out the psychology of this cult, because that's going to be really what powers this story.
Well, historically, a lot of them tend to not really fear the leader himself. They tend to be more afraid of the perceived backlash of returning and being kind of kicked out of the group, if anything. They fear more of the idea of no longer being part of the cult, usually.
Kind of like a flock mentality. Without the flock, you shall perish.
Yeah, because that tends to be what a lot of cults tend to use as their main idea, is that, hey, you need us because we provide this, and if you don't have us anymore, you're out of luck.
Okay. Now that is kind of like the realistic psychological element. However, this is also an RPG, and in this scenario, we have an elder entity that reanimates wholly believable replicas of people they feed to it. Let's try to psych this out a little bit. How this would influence these people and their leader. The fact that they worship this Oblex and feed it their loved ones, so that way they'll quote unquote like be with them forever. Obviously, they would protect this Oblex with like everything they have. Like that might be a good source of power for them as well. Any thoughts?
I'm thinking on it. Oh, part of me is like,
So I have absolute faith in the nature of the Oblex to immortalize their loved ones. They will defend it with their lives and even sacrifice themselves if needed to ensure its survival. Now, obviously, I think this also kind of goes with a bit of propaganda in the sense that, like, no one really understands the Oblex, which is why they don't fear it or haven't, like, destroyed it or tried to get rid of it. I think this all kind of had to start with this individual that discovered the Oblex, maybe fed it a loved one, realized its power, shared that power with others, and that's how the cult seeded and grew, which is like the thing that binds them all is this experience. With their lives even sacrifice themselves again. I kind of like that element because I was kind of imagining towards like the end of the climax of the battle, if it looks like the Oblex is going to die, like the cult leader would just like issue the order, and then everybody would just kind of like throw themselves into it and just be absorbed, and it just turns into this even more massive, grotesque abomination. Are we getting stuck on
so I think maybe like if reading more on the Oblex and like what it does, I think it's better to create an atmosphere of paranoia than Oblex. Because if you're doing a cult leader and sacrifice for gain, that feels more like your traditional like pact with a devil or a demon or something like that.
I wasn't necessarily going for sacrifice for gain. I was going like they sacrifice more with respect to like the fear of loss. Like this.
I mean, you could use
their like channel to immortality is this Oblex.
I would say like a necromancer would probably be right, because I think with an Oblex, it's more like I think if you come to a town like, I guess the best analogy is like the synths in Fallout 4 is the idea is that like you can't trust even your spouse because you don't know if your spouse is actually that person or if it's like a mimic. I mean, that's the reason why mimics are terrifying in D&D is that
I hadn't even considered the paranoia component.
yeah, because I mean, it's just like mimics in D&D. Whenever you go to a treasure chest, it's like, oh, it's a treasure chest or it could be a mimic. And you create that sense of paranoia. But with an oblex, instead of material objects being that paranoia you have about, is now people in the town. And so if you're coming there as outsiders, not knowing the situation, not knowing who's who, you don't know who to trust. And the town doesn't even know to trust you also.
Are you pitching
and so you can
paranoia for the town people who are participating?
For everyone.
Or are you more or less like, this is going to be a lot of good paranoia potential for the players?
For the players and the town, right? So the town,
more dedicated townies who are like in on it probably wouldn't mind. In fact, it feels kind of like ascendant to them. But others less like bought into it. Those might be the paranoid people who you can kind of get on.
I don't know,
of like spilling the beans or something.
Well, I don't know what the Oblex's agenda is, like, and that's part of it. Is that like
the only agenda is to consume, right? So like it's totally what I'm looking for here. I'm not arguing with you. I'm just trying to answer your questions so we can get on a page here.
Hey everyone, thank you for checking out the video. If you enjoyed what you just saw, be sure to give us a like, comment, and subscribe. If you don't want to miss any of our content, be sure to hit the bell icon where you will be notified anytime we upload a video. Also, if you wish to watch RPG Workshop live, you can follow Studio Bastion on Twitch. There you can also enjoy his gameplay live streams and other podcasts that are in production. Also, if you like what we're doing here at Escape Reality Films, be sure to check out our Patreon and support us, and get some cool rewards in return.